Anaya stood by the grand window of her elegantly furnished drawing room in Islamabad, a cup of chamomile tea in her hand, her other resting gently on her 8-month pregnant belly. The house was quiet, too quiet, filled with the kind of silence that echoed off marble floors and designer wallpaper. From the outside, her life looked like a dream, a luxury villa in one of the city's most elite sectors, a husband who was a successful businessman, and a baby on the way. But inside, Anaya felt a hollowness she could no longer explain away. She was 27, graceful, well-educated, and once full of life. Now, her laughter had grown rarer, her eyes often searching for warmth in a place that had grown emotionally cold. Faisal, her husband, had once been attentive, romantic even. But over the past year, especially since she became pregnant, he had grown increasingly distant. Business meetings late into the night, phone calls behind locked doors, and a sense of detachment that left Anaya wondering if she had done something wrong. At first, she brushed it off. "It's just stress," she told herself. "He's carrying the weight of work and now the baby too." She tried to stay positive, decorating the nursery with care, reading parenting books, and keeping herself busy. But Faisal's indifference was impossible to ignore. He rarely touched her anymore, barely spoke beyond small talk, and every time she brought up her feelings, he waved them off. "You're overthinking everything," he'd say, with an exasperated sigh. "Must be the hormones. You've become so sensitive." The word stung. Was she imagining it? Were the mood swings just pregnancy-related, or was there something darker she wasn't willing to admit? Enter Shazia, tall, sleek, and always dressed in stylish suits. Shazia was Faisal's so-called business manager. She was at the house more often than not, dropping off files, discussing meetings, and walking around like she belonged. She never seemed to knock. She didn't have to. She had keys. Anaya had noticed that small fact a few months ago, a quiet alarm ringing in her mind. At first, Anaya welcomed her. Faisal claimed Shazia was indispensable to his company, the reason his deals closed so efficiently. But it didn't take long for Shazia's overly familiar behavior to unsettle her. The way she walked into their living room, poured herself a drink from their bar, or laughed just a little too loud at Faisal's dry jokes. It all felt wrong. Then came the glances, long, lingering stares from Shazia when Faisal wasn't looking. Not mocking, not warm, just observing, calculating, as though Anaya were a puzzle to be solved or a threat to be eliminated. Still, Faisal defended her without question. Whenever Anaya expressed discomfort, he dismissed it outright. "Jealousy doesn't suit you," he said one evening when she questioned why. Shazia had been in their bedroom looking for paperwork. "She's here for work, not everything is about you." Anaya felt the walls of her marriage shift that day. There was a subtle but undeniable alliance between her husband and his manager, one she couldn't put her finger on yet, but one. Her instincts warned her not to ignore Dot in the days that followed. Anaya began to feel like a guest in her own home, her every move watched, her emotions gaslighted, her voice slowly silenced under the weight of luxury and lies. What once felt like a palace now felt like a prison, a marriage built not on trust, but on a fragile illusion that was starting to crack, and somewhere deep inside, Anaya knew the truth was waiting just beneath the surface. Anaya had always considered her home a sanctuary, a place of warmth and safety. But ever since Shazia's presence began growing like ivy through every corner of the house, that sanctuary started to feel invaded. Shazia had slowly become a permanent fixture. No longer just Faisal's business manager, she was now everywhere, in the kitchen giving orders to the cook, in the lounge flipping through files with her heels up on the sofa, and sometimes even in Anaya's private sitting room, humming to herself as if it were hers. Anaya tried to remain graceful. She was raised to believe in dignity and trusting one's husband and not making a scene. that dignity began to feel like a muzzle, one that stopped her from questioning what her instincts screamed. There were subtle mockeries, the sideways glances, the tight smiles, the way Shazia would accidentally rearrange Anaya's things. Her books would be found misplaced, her favorite throw folded away with a smirk. Her personal notes moved from her knitstand to the dresser. When Anaya would ask, Shazia would act surprised. "Oh, I thought the maid was cleaning. My mistake." She said it with such faux sweetness that it made Anaya's skin crawl. Once, Anaya walked into the kitchen and found Shazia instructing the staff on how to make Faisal's tea. "He likes it strong, not too milky, unlike what he's been getting lately," she added with a casual flick of her manicured nails. The cook laughed nervously. Anaya froze. She wanted to respond, but she was 8 months pregnant, exhausted. An emotionally frayed Dod, she complained to Faisal that evening. His reaction was like cold water to the face. "Seriously, Anaya? This again? You're pregnant, not paranoid." "She's managing work. She's helping." "Helping?" Anaya whispered, stunned. "She's making herself at home. Because I told her to. This house is half business, Anaya. You knew that when you married me." The conversation ended with Faisal walking out to take a call. From Shazia, Anaya felt herself unraveling slowly, quietly. The signs were everywhere, but no one else saw them, or chose not to. One morning, she noticed a lipstick stain on one of the tall crystal glasses they only use for dinner parties. A dark red shade, not hers. She hadn't worn makeup in weeks. Then came the scent, a sharp floral perfume that clung to the bedsheets, so different from her own mild fragrance. It lingered on Faisal's collar in their shared bathroom, even once in the nursery. Her stomach twisted. She didn't tell anyone, not even her mother, who lived in another city and often asked if everything was okay. What could she say? "There's another woman in my house, and I think she's replacing me." Who would believe her? The staff avoided eye contact when she asked questions. The once chirpy housemaids now answered in clipped tones. Everyone seemed to tiptoe around Shazia as if she held the strings to their jobs. Maybe she did. Faisal had given her access to everything: keys, staff, even financial documents. Anaya felt like a stranger in her own home, her world tilting slowly, dangerously. One particularly hot afternoon, while resting in her room with the door slightly ajar, Anaya overheard voices from the corridor. She recognized the maid's shaky tone and Shazia's cutting voice. "I told you to clean the patio, not gossip in the kitchen." Shazia snapped. "Do it again, or I'll tell Faisal you've been stealing fruit." "Baji, I swear I didn't." "Shut up," Shazia hissed. "This is not your house. Do as you're told." Anaya sat upright, blood rushing to her face. The rage behind Shazia's voice was undeniable. No sweetness, no pretense. It was pure venom. The maid fled down the hallway, barely holding back tears. Anaya got up and stepped outside. Shazia stood there, composed, lipstick perfect, phone in hand. She turned and offered Anaya a sickening smile. "Oh, I hope we didn't disturb you." "I was just sorting out some issues with the help," Anaya said. Nothing. Her hands trembled, her baby kicked, and something deep within her shifted. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It wasn't paranoia. There was something deeply wrong here. And she knew now. Shazia wasn't just a snake in the house. She was tightening her coils, preparing to strike. The silence in the house had taken a different tone. It no longer felt empty. It felt haunted. The air itself seemed to grow heavier when Shazia walked through the halls, her heels clicking like warning shots. With Faisal away for business more frequently now, Shazia had begun to act like the true lady of the house. She no longer hid her disdain behind smiles or subtle digs. Her cruelty had become open, casual, like a predator no longer concerned with hiding its teeth, Anaya, now in her final month of pregnancy, was exhausted. Her body ached from the weight of the baby, her emotions frayed from the relentless tension. The bruises on her soul were starting to show in her eyes. She avoided Shazia as much as possible, staying in her room, reading old books, trying to focus on the life she was about to bring into the world. But even in isolation, peace didn't come. Because Shazia didn't allow it. Still here? Shazia said one morning, barging into Anaya's room without knocking. I thought you would have gone to your parents by now, or anywhere else. Anaya didn't respond. She looked away, holding her stomach protectively. Shazia walked closer, circling her like a vulture. You think this house is yours? That child in your belly is the only thing keeping you here. You trapped him. You manipulated him, but he sees through you now. He's with someone stronger. Someone he actually wants. Anaya's lips trembled, but she said nothing. She wouldn't give Shazia the satisfaction. Shazia sneered, her eyes narrowing. You know what your real problem is? You've always been weak. Fragile. Too delicate to handle a man like Faisal. And soon, you'll be nothing more than a discarded name on a divorce paper. The next moment happened faster than Anaya could process. In a sudden fit of rage, Shazia grabbed a nearby steel curtain rod, one that had been leaning against the wall from ongoing home repairs, and without warning, struck Anaya hard across her shoulder. Anaya screamed, stumbling back, clutching her stomach. Stop, please, I'm pregnant. But Shazia didn't stop. Another blow landed on her side, then another. Anaya collapsed to the floor, crying, one arm shielding her belly, the other desperately trying to push Shazia away. The pain was excruciating, blinding. It wasn't just physical, it was betrayal in its rawest, most violent form. You don't belong here. Shazia shouted, her voice shrill and full of venom. Get out of this house. With shocking strength, Shazia dragged the bleeding Anaya toward the main entrance, her limbs limp, her cries fading into whispers. Blood stained the floor. Her clothes were torn. The world around her spun with pain, terror, and disbelief. As Shazia shoved her onto the porch like unwanted trash. The gate guard, an elderly man who had served the family for years, saw the scene unfold. His mouth fell open in horror. Baji, what happened? He shouted, running toward her. Shazia, suddenly aware she was no longer alone, stepped back and muttered something about an accident before storming back inside and slamming the door. The guard didn't hesitate. He shouted for the driver who had just returned from an errand. Together, they rushed Anaya into the car and drove straight to the hospital. Ignoring every red light along the way. At the emergency ward, Anaya was rushed in on a stretcher. Blood pooled beneath her. Her eyes fluttered open and shut, her lips murmuring incoherent words. Doctors and nurses swarmed the room. Vitals were crashing. The baby was in distress. Time was running out. Inside the operating room, the lead doctor barked orders. She's in hypovolemic shock. We need fluids. Now. Prepare for emergency fetal monitoring. Anaya drifted in and out of consciousness. Her mind replayed the assault like a nightmare on loop. Shazia's voice, the rod, the floor, her child. Was her baby alive? Was this it? A sharp sound pierced. Her thoughts, a heartbeat, fast, strong. The baby. After hours of monitoring and medical intervention, the crisis stabilized. The baby was still inside, holding on. By some miracle, no bones had been broken and the womb had remained intact. The bruises were deep, but the baby had survived. So had she. When Anaya finally opened her eyes in the dim hospital room, it was quiet again. But not like the silence of her home. This was a fragile piece, heavy with pain. Her body ached, her lips were dry. And the fourth dripped beside her. A nurse stood near the door, gently checking her chart, Anaya tried to speak but found no voice. Only a whisper escaped her. The nurse leaned in. "You're safe now." "You were lucky, very lucky." Tears welled up in Anaya's eyes. She was alive. Her baby was alive. But everything else, the home, the husband, the dreams, had been shattered. What remained now was a shell. A woman broken in body and soul. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the trauma, something stirred. Not rage, not revenge, but survival. The quiet, trembling will to fight, not just for herself, but for the child she was still carrying. Could news of Anaya's brutal assault and stay hidden for long? Within hours of her hospitalization, whispers rippled through Islamabad's high society. A pregnant woman, beaten and left on the doorstep of her own mansion, rushed to the ICU, but behind the hushed conversations and shocked gasps, one man. Read the truth in black and white. Adil Rahman, a self-made millionaire. Adil was known for his sharp intellect, steely demeanor, and clean business ethics, a rare breed in the corporate circles Faisal belonged to. The two had co-invested in multiple ventures over the past 5 years. Faisal was flashy, charming, and manipulative. Adil was reserved, precise, and strategic. They tolerated each other for business, not friendship, but what Faisal never knew, and what Adil had buried deeply, was that years ago, before Anaya had married Faisal, Adil had met her at a charity event. He still remembered the way she had spoken to the children there, gentle, honest, completely unaware of how her smile disarmed the room. He never acted on it. She was engaged then, and Adil had always believed in boundaries. Now, he sat in his office, the hospital report spread before him, his knuckles white against the desk. Photos of Anaya's injuries were attached. Deep purple bruises along her ribs, a swollen cheekbone, cuts across her arms. The words "blunt force trauma" and "domestic assault" were underlined. His stomach twisted in disbelief and rage. Faisal had done this, or worse, allowed it to happen. He stood abruptly, tossing the file onto the table. This wasn't just a legal matter. It was something else now. Something deeply personal. 2 days later, Anaya sat propped up in the hospital bed, a pale blanket pulled to her chest. Her face was tired, her skin ghostly. Dark shadows hollowed her eyes, and though her body had begun healing, her silence remained unbroken. The door creaked open, and a man in a crisp navy suit stepped inside. "Adil?" she whispered, almost unsure if it was a memory or real. He nodded, standing awkwardly by the door. "Hi, Anaya." She blinked, confused. Why are you here?" "I saw the report," he said gently, not moving closer until she gave him permission with her eyes. I needed to see." I had to." Anaya looked down, embarrassed. "You shouldn't have come. Everyone must be talking." "I don't care," Adil replied, his voice low but steady. "Let them talk." She gave a weak, bitter smile. "You must think I'm pathetic." "No," he said sharply. "Don't do that. Don't blame yourself for someone else's sickness." Silence filled the room again. Anaya clutched the blanket tighter, staring at her fingers. "I didn't think it would get this bad. I saw it all happening, slowly, but I still stayed. For the child, for what I thought was love." Adil took a chair and sat beside her bed. "You loved him. That's not weakness. That's trust. He broke it, not you." Tears threatened to fall from her eyes, but she blinked them away. He paused, hesitant, then spoke again. "You remember that charity event? Years ago? You wore that sea green kurta and kept giving away all the chocolates before the program even started." A flicker of amusement crossed her face. "You remember that?" "How could I forget?" he said softly. "I remember thinking that I'd never seen anyone so real." Anaya turned her face toward the window, the sun painting faint gold. lines on her bruised skin. But I still chose wrong, didn't I? You chose with hope, and you survived with strength. That's more than most could do. She looked at him again, really looked this time. There was no pity in his eyes. Only fire. Only concern. I want justice, she whispered. Not just for me, for this child. I want them both held accountable. Faisal, Shazia, Adil nodded. Them will get it, every bit of it. But not for revenge, she added quickly, her voice trembling. I don't want to sink to their level. His eyes softened. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. About making sure they can't hurt anyone else. Anaya exhaled deeply, a weight beginning to shift from her chest. She expected whispers, sideways looks, maybe even judgment, but Adil offered none of that. Just honesty. Just help. Just belief. He handed her a folder. Inside her contacts, a legal team, a female investigator, and a counselor who specializes in trauma recovery. They'll work under your name, not mine. This is your fight. But I'll be right behind you if you need me. Anaya opened the folder, her hands still weak. Just seeing those names gave her a strange sense of control. A feeling she hadn't felt in months. I don't know how to thank you, she said quietly. You don't need to, he replied. You don't owe me anything, Anaya. The only thing you owe now is to yourself and to that baby. A movement under her hand reminded her the baby was still there, alive, waiting, witness to all she had endured. And perhaps all she would now overcome. As Adil stood to leave, Anaya spoke once more. Why are you really doing this? He paused at the door, turning halfway. Because, he said, voice thick with emotion, no woman deserves this. And especially not you. The door closed gently behind him. And for the first time in weeks, Anaya didn't feel alone. She felt seen. And soon, she would be heard. While Anaya rested and healed in the hospital, far away from the poisonous environment of her home, Adil was already moving in silence. He had always been methodical in business, a man who played the long game, but this was different. This was personal. This time, he wasn't protecting assets. He was protecting someone who had once mattered deeply, and who still did. Adil hired his most trusted contact, a former intelligence officer turned private investigator, Navid Qureshi. Discreet, sharp, and relentless, Navid began digging into the one person Adil never trusted, Shazia. Within a week, the truth began to surface like rot beneath a polished floor. Shazia Malik wasn't a qualified business manager at all. Her degrees were a fake printed from a diploma mill in a forgotten corner of the internet. Her previous employment records were forged. She had no real corporate background. What she had was charm, connections, and a long history of manipulation. But more than that, she had been with Faisal for years, even before he married Anaya. Photos emerged, hotel bookings, leaked texts, even old emails between Shazia and Faisal that clearly hinted at their ongoing affair during the first year of Faisal's marriage. She wasn't just a mistress, she had helped plan the facade. And now, she had nearly destroyed Anaya to replace her. But that wasn't all. Navid also uncovered layers of financial misconduct. Hidden accounts under shell companies, property assets under Shazia's name, money siphoned through fake business expenses. It was a joint operation. Faisal and Shazia had built an empire on stolen trust. And Anaya, legally Faisal's wife, was entitled to far more than they'd imagined. Her signature had been forged on more than one financial document, her name used to legitimize transactions she'd never approved. That made it not just fraud, but criminal conspiracy. Adil presented all this to Anaya, not in one harsh blow, but gently, sitting beside her in her hospital room one quiet afternoon. They weren't just trying to erase you emotionally, he said, his voice controlled but tight with anger. They were planning to erase your rights, your identity, everything. Anaya listened in silence, hands folded over her belly. She didn't cry. She didn't speak for a long time. But when she finally did, her voice was steady. Let's show them I still exist. That was the moment something changed in her eyes. She was still in pain, still scarred, but there was a fire now. Slow burning, but undeniable. She had been discarded, humiliated, nearly destroyed, but she was still here, still breathing. And she wasn't going to hide anymore. Adil had already arranged legal counsel, a top-tier female lawyer with a reputation for fighting domestic abuse and corporate fraud. With Adil's resources and Naveed's evidence, the case was airtight. Anaya agreed to file 3 charges: domestic abuse and assault against Shazia, complicity and financial fraud against Fazal, and intentional endangerment of a pregnant woman. But before anything was filed, Anaya insisted on one more thing: a therapist. I need to speak, she told Adil one day. Not in court, not to the police, just to someone who won't look at me like a case file. He understood that the therapist was kind, professional, and patient. With her, Anaya began to unravel the years of silent gaslighting, the isolation, the moments she blamed herself for not seeing the signs. The sessions weren't easy, but with every one, she began to breathe a little freer. By the end of the 2nd month, her medical reports were clear. The baby was healthy, growing well. Anaya had moved into a private recovery apartment arranged by Adil, away from the press, the judgmental eyes, and most importantly, away from Faisal. One rainy morning, she walked into her lawyer's office and signed the papers. This is not revenge, she said, her voice clear. This is accountability. And with that, the wheel of justice finally began to turn. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back walls, their cameras forbidden inside, but their pens eager. The case had made national headlines. Talk shows debated it, social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag beaten but brave, hashtag pregnant and powerful, and the most chilling of all, hashtag still rot scandal. The media had dubbed it the beaten wife and the billionaire. From the outside, it looked like another tragic tale of wealth, betrayal, and abuse, but once the details emerged, it became something else entirely. It became a reckoning. Shazia was the first to enter the court, her head held high, dressed in modest clothes unlike her usual designer suits. Her makeup was toned down, her expression carefully neutral, calculated to earn sympathy. But the public wasn't buying it. She took the stand and began her performance. I never meant to hurt Anaya, she said, her voice trembling with faux emotion. It was a moment of weakness. Things got out of hand. I was under stress. Hormonal changes, my own mental health. I didn't know what I was doing. The judge remained expressionless. The lawyers exchanged glances. The prosecution had already expected this defense. But then came Faisal, once the image of wealth and power. Faisal now looked pale, visibly agitated. His legal team whispered urgently in his ear before he took the stand. He straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and did exactly what snakes do when cornered. He turned on his own. She acted alone, Faisal claimed. I was unaware of the extent of her instability. I trusted her as a colleague. She exploited that. He didn't mention love. He didn't say relationship or affair, just cold, calculated distance. He was ready to feed Shazia to the wolves if it meant preserving what little reputation he had left. But what neither of them realized was that Adil and Anaya had come prepared, and not just emotionally. Adil's private investigator had recovered more than just messages and records. He had uncovered video footage from the house's internal security system. Hidden CCTV clips that showed Shazia entering Anaya's room uninvited, shouting at staff, moving documents, and most damning of all, her walking through the hallway. Moments before the attack, carrying the steel rod, the footage wasn't graphic, but it was enough combined with the doctor's testimony, detailing Anaya's injuries consistent with blunt force trauma and the hospital records. The case of assault became undeniable. And then came the financial evidence. Bank statements, fake invoices, shell companies, transactions in Shazia's name connected to Faisal's business. The numbers told a story even greedier than the betrayal. Millions siphoned slowly, cleverly, until someone looked closely. The judge's tone changed. The defense's confidence shattered. Shazia was arrested in court on charges of assault, fraud, and identity misrepresentation. Her fake degrees and employment files were submitted as evidence. She was taken into custody as the courtroom watched silently. Faisal, now cornered, faced charges for complicity, financial fraud, forgery, and domestic negligence. His lawyer tried to argue coercion, that Shazia manipulated him, but the paper trail said otherwise. His name was on too many approvals, his voice in too many messages, and through it all, Anaya sat in the courtroom, quiet and poised. She wore a soft cream-colored shalwar kameez, her hair pinned back, her hands resting on her growing belly. She did not look weak. She did not look broken. She looked like someone who had walked through fire and survived. When her turn came to speak, the courtroom went still. "I trusted him," she began. "I trusted both of them. I carried their secrets longer than I should have because I believed in the promise of marriage. But trust is not a license for cruelty, and silence is not consent." She looked directly at Faisal. "I gave you my years, my heart, and our unborn child. And you gave me betrayal, bruises, and shame. Then at Shazia, you tried to erase me. From my home, my marriage, and even from my own life. But here I am." She turned back to the judge. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because women like me, women who are told to stay quiet, to stay married, to stay ashamed, need to know that justice exists, that we can stand, that we can fight, that we can win." The silence after her statement was deafening, not out of awkwardness, but reverence. No one clapped. But everyone heard her that day. The judge announced bail denial for Shazia and conditional custody for Faisal pending further trial. As she stepped out of the courtroom, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. But Anaya didn't stop for interviews. She walked with Adil by her side, her face calm, her steps steady. And though the world had once turned its back on her, now it watched her, not with pity, but with awe. Anaya had become more than a victim. She had become a symbol of survival, of strength, of the kind of woman no steel rod could destroy. Monsoon had passed, and with it, the longest, darkest season of Anaya's life. Months had gone by since the verdict. Shazia remained in jail, awaiting a full sentence, while Faisal, stripped of his assets and reputation, fought a losing legal battle that barely drew sympathy. His empire had crumbled beneath the weight of his crimes. But Anaya, she had only just begun to build her star in a small private maternity ward in the outskirts of Murray. Surrounded by pine-covered hills and gentle winds, Anaya gave birth to a healthy, strong baby girl. The labor had been long, painful, and emotional, but as soon as she heard that first piercing cry, a warmth spread through her that no trauma could extinguish. She named her daughter Noor, light. When the nurse handed Noor into her arms, Anaya wept, not from fear or grief, but from overwhelming joy. This child had survived violence, heartbreak, betrayal, and still entered the world fighting, breathing, radiant. Looking down at her, Anaya whispered, "You are not the end of my story. You are the beginning." Faisal, through his lawyers, tried to send compensation, a large sum of money, as part of a proposed settlement. He wanted to make things right, or so the legal letter claimed. Anaya didn't even blink. She sent back a single line. I don't want his money. I want his accountability. The funds were rejected. The message was clear. Her dignity was not for sale. Adil remained respectfully present throughout it all. A steady support, never overstepping, never pressuring. He visited after Noor was born, bringing a soft yellow baby blanket embroidered with her name. He held the baby in his arms with reverence, tears welling in his eyes. She's going to change everything, he said softly. Anaya smiled. She already has. Once Noor was a few weeks old, Anaya sat down with Adil and proposed an idea that had been growing inside her like a quiet flame. I want to start something, she said. For women like me, for the ones who never make it to court, who are silenced before they can even speak. And with Adil's full support, financially and emotionally, the Noor Foundation was born. It started as a support group. Safe meetings, quiet spaces, therapy sessions, legal aid workshops. Women came from all over the city, some still hiding bruises beneath scarves, others trembling just to say their names, but they came, and they spoke. And slowly they healed. Anaya didn't just run the foundation, she became its heart. She didn't speak as a survivor alone, but as someone who had once believed that silence was safer. And now, she shattered silence for others. One evening, as Noor lay asleep in her crib and the rain tapped gently on the windows, Adil sat across from Anaya, sipping tea. There was a quiet between them, not awkward, not uncertain. Just full. I need to tell you something, he said at last. She looked up. I never stopped caring, he continued. Not since that first day I saw you. I stayed away because you were married. I stayed quiet because I thought it was right. But I want you to know I'm here if you ever want something more. The room went still. Anaya stared at him. For a long moment, heart both touched and torn. I know, she said finally. And if you had said this months ago, I might have run toward it. But now, I need to heal first, not for you. Not for the idea of love, but for myself, for Noor. He nodded, a soft smile forming. I'll wait. No expectations, just ... Gratitude that you're okay. They didn't need to say more. Some connections weren't meant to be rushed. Healing wasn't a race. 6 months later, Anaya stood on the stage of a women's empowerment gala in Lahore. The hall was filled with women, lawyers, survivors, activists, students, all gathered under one roof, listening to stories of strength, defiance, and transformation. Anaya, dressed simply in an off-white cotton sari, her hair pulled back neatly, stepped up to the microphone. Noor sat with Adil in the front row, playing with a small stuffed bear. Anaya began. There was a time I believed silence protected peace. That endurance was a virtue and survival was enough. But the day someone tried to erase me from my own life, I learned that silence is not peace, it is surrender. And I refused to surrender. The applause was immediate. I was thrown out of my home, beaten, left to bleed. Not just by a stranger, but by people I trusted, loved. But I rose. Not because I'm extraordinary, but because I decided I was worth saving. Her voice didn't shake once. I don't stand here as a victim. I stand here as a mother, as a survivor, as a woman who rebuilt from ashes. And if you are listening to this, wondering if your voice matters, it does. You matter. Your story matters. Speak, even if your voice trembles. When she stepped off stage, Noor ran, or waddled, into her arms, babbling nonsense with joy. Anaya scooped her up, tears prickling her eyes. The lights dimmed behind them, the crowd still applauding as she walked out of the building. The air crisp and clean, the stars scattered above like a promise. She held Noor against her heart and exhaled. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't broken. She was whole, and the world had better make space. Final line narration. They tried to throw her out, but she walked back in with fire in her soul.